This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. What's better than a cup of coffee? Not much, but maybe, just maybe, a coffee company that donates a portion of its proceeds back to support conservation. And that's exactly what Skull Brew Coffee Company does. We roast premium coffee that ships out within just hours of roasting, guaranteeing that you get the freshest coffee available. The kicker, we donate 10% of our proceeds back to conservation. You choose where the donation goes at checkout. You can check us out at skullbrewcoffee.com, and now through March 8th, use the promo code TRUTH and get 15% off your purchase. So the end of this week, this promo will run out. So let's do something good together and help protect wild places one cup at a time. Visit skullbrewcoffee.com and pledge your support of conservation today. Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 110. Today we're wrapping up this installment of the DIY report, and we are covering public land trail camera strategies for rut and late season. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are doing well out there. Hope you're getting a chance to get out and do a little shed hunting. Shed rally is just around the corner here. I'll probably have to skip this weekend as I do have some plans, some family plans, a weekend with no children or no child at the house. So the wife and I are going to have a weekend alone to kind of hang out, do some sightseeing. I think we're actually going to go do some axe throwing this weekend is what's on the docket. That is as long as I am feeling up to it. I was doing a little traveling this weekend to the Midwest, though. Spent some time with Johnny Utah out in Iowa. We have a podcast coming up that we'll talk about kind of our excursions while I was out there, little scouting, little shed hunting. The snow had different plans for us, though, but during my travels, I managed to pick up whatever flu kind of illness that's been going around, and I'm sure being in the airport and in planes didn't help me a whole lot. So I'm feeling a little worse for wear here. So with that, we're going to keep this up front pretty short. And as I may have a coughing fit if I go on too long, and we'll just kind of jump to the meat of this thing. But before we jump into today's episode, let's take a quick second to talk about our partners from Exodus Outdoor Gear. If you like Exodus trail cameras, then who wouldn't? Scouting or Onyx maps, then you'll want to take advantage of the Exodus promotion going on now through the end of March. Now through the end of March, you will get a free Onyx premium membership with every Exodus trail camera purchased from ExodusOutdoorGear.com. This, of course, is while supplies last, and these are going pretty quickly, as you can imagine, so you may want to jump on this sooner rather than later. You can also pre-order the Render cell camera, which is new and will be coming out, I believe it will be shipping in April, or you can add another Trek camera to your scouting arsenal and lock in to the $30 value-free gift from Onyx. Visit ExodusOutdoorGear.com and add the Onyx membership card and any camera and receive these automatic savings. I don't think there's a better 1-2 punch for spring scouting than a killer camera and killer maps. Take advantage of this offer today by visiting ExodusOutdoorGear.com. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. You are listening to part 3 of the Public Land Camera Strategies DIY report. And again, as always, joined by my good buddies, Chad and Jake from Exodus Trail Cameras. What's going on, fellas?
Not much, man. Just hanging out here at the Great American Outdoor Show.
Still at the Outdoor Show.
It's a great show.
Yeah. So we'll just jump right in, man. I know the first 2 parts we covered, qualifying a parcel and kind of figuring out what pieces we want to hunt and identifying, if there are deer that we want to chase. Part 2, we really kind of looked at the early season, changing food sources, how you want to start leapfrogging and getting on a deer. If you find something you want to hunt, how do you try to narrow down his core area, essentially, and then talked about some scrapes and like different types of terrain features we're going to want to focus on during that time of the year. And so today, what we're going to talk about during this episode, part 3, is we're really going to talk about the rut. Everyone looks for it. It's Super Bowl weekend here as we're recording this, so it's the rut is the Super Bowl of deer hunting for many. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about late season and how we're using our cameras, on public land. And we're also going to still have a juxtaposition to how that might be different or the same when we're talking about private land. So to get started, during this time of year, and let's start with rut first. Or when you're, where are you moving cameras to during the rut time of the hunting season?
So most of my attention is going to doe bedding and scrape areas. And I'm trying to build 365 data. So I'll put those cameras there, and a lot of times I won't check them if I have spare cameras. So I'm trying to gather a baseline of data revolving around the rut to use as historical data for the following season. Because what we've seen with running so many dang cameras on public, there's a 365-day pattern where those deer will be back within, if they're live and all
eerie.
outside influences are the same,
Right.
they'll be back within a 3-day window, year to year to year.
Yeah.
And it's, a lot of people think that's crazy, but we've seen it so much. It's eye-opening.
Well, it's like
So-
the proof was in the pudding again this year when we were in Ohio. For 3 years now, the area that I've hunted, whether the first year I was there, Tate was there the last year, then this year I was there. We've seen the same thing happen within like that same week period of time,
Yeah.
right? Just the trail camera data that we have, I think, is a good example. It's like we had, I think those two shooters showed up once in Velvet, right, at the August, sometime like late August, right? Never showed up again, and that camera was soaking since we were there in what, April or March?
Yeah, April or March, yeah.
Yeah, and so that camera was there the entire time. One picture of two different shooter bucks on that camera. Never saw them again, and then all of a sudden it was October 31st, I think, like Halloween, and like the November 1st and 2nd, they were showing back up, right? Which was like just exactly in line with what we had seen. Previously, but I didn't mean to cut you off. I just thought, we had some real life example there that we actually had this year.
Well, the deer I killed this year was down to the day.
Down to the day, really.
Yeah, I had in 2017, I had him come through in the middle of the night on November 1st. This year, I had him come down through the same ditch November 1st and killed him like November 3rd.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's down to the day. And then another kind of applicable scenario was I was on another piece of property. November 7th last year, I hunted it, and 3.5-year-old, like kind of pencil real wide 8-pointer comes by like limping along like rutting hard. This year, 2 hours before, I was in the stand. I physically saw that. This year, I had pulled the camera, and it was 2 hours before. So it was like 1:30 in the afternoon. Same exact field edge, same day, 2 hours before, and he was rutting, just coming down the same field edge. And that was the only time last year I saw him. This is the only time I got a picture of him this year. So
Right.
whatever reason, I mean, you can capitalize if you're running those cameras. That's
Yeah.
you got to look at it as a
And-
holistic approach.
Yeah, well, the
Multi-year.
thought process there is, so you can't be everywhere at once. Like
Yep.
the rut, you need to be in the woods, you need to be doing your thing, yes, but if there's points of interest you have that you're unsure of, go set those cameras up, let them run for the entire month. And I do that quite often to kind of classify properties that get hot in different times for the following year. But for like in-season data, the best thing is to run a cellular camera if it's possible. You're getting real-time data where you may catch that deer on a scrape that's coming in. He might hole up in that area for 3 days, but you get the first photo of him, and you have a small window to come in and make a move to have a harvest opportunity. So if you're running cell cameras, that's a big deal. Like
Right.
monitoring those scrapes when those scrapes are drying up. One of the things that we see on public is once those scrapes start to dry up, you better be shifting your attention to those bedding areas, because those bucks are probably cruising those bedding areas, trying to get that doe, trying to get it on lockdown, whatnot. So,
Right.
people are always paying attention to when those deer are coming in, working those scrapes, but when they're dead, they're like,
When they're
the
dead,
scrapes
that's-
dried up. Like,
yeah.
okay, they're dried up. That means you need to be doing this.
Right.
Like,
It-
get your attention to the bedding.
It's interesting because I think a lot of folks make the mistake of like trying to find the next hot scrapes.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Versus trying to find the doe bedding area where the bucks are going to go
Right.
try to jam.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And just real quick, we talk a lot about human intrusion and not negatively impacting deer movement by checking your cameras too often. Like me personally, in the rut, like deer do stupid things. Like their
Yeah.
guards down. I've seen big deer do dumb stuff. I'm checking
Right.
those cameras as often as I need to.
Right.
Like if that's my point of interest, if I know there's a big deer in the area that I'm trying to kill, like it doesn't matter. I'm going to check those cameras whenever I need to devise a plan.
Right.
Yeah, and when I'm running cameras on scrapes, I'll leave them on there. Like, I don't care if it's going to be dead for 5, 6, 7, 8 days. When that doe comes in and hits that scrape, and then there's a big buck the next day, so when I have that render on a scrape and I get a doe coming in November 8th, November 9th,
Right.
I'm going to be there the next day because there's a pretty good chance the dominant buck's going to come in there. And I saw that, multiple times. That really big one that got shot, he came in, doe hit it November 9th, or I was in there,
Right.
The 10th he came and hit the scrape, and then he was in those doe bedding areas cruising through, that week of November. So
That's a super valid point. When those scrapes start to dry up, leave your cameras there. Like we talk about, asking yourself why aren't you getting those pictures? And that's a scenario where you want to leave those cameras there to monitor when that scrape's going to be active again. And,
Right.
So
Because I think a lot of folks, and I think I might have even written an article about this, is like using your trail camera data. Like, yes, you want to be paying attention to it in season because it can help you make some moves, right? But you're really only going to help you make moves on deer that you know about from previous years a lot of times.
Bodies, typically.
Right. Or when when you're deer on that property are going to use certain terrain features or certain parts of a property or whatever.
Right.
It can do that as well, right? But you should really be looking back at like your previous information, right? Because that's really what's going to help you actually hunt that year, right? Because it's really hard to make a plan real time. And you should, of course, like this is also like we're not saying that cameras are the only way to like approach your hunting. It's like you still have to be looking at hot sign and paying attention to all those things, right? So it's not like it's the only thing. Like we mentioned in the first part number one, it's like this is a tool to help you. Right. It's not the thing that's going to get you to the end goal necessarily, because you still have to put all the other pieces together. This is just a piece. It helps you put a lot of pieces together if you use it the right way and if you're moving it the right way. You know what I mean? So I'm curious, because especially during the rut, regardless of the time of year, I just want to get both of your take, like how close are you willing to set your cameras up to where you plan to hunt? Because some guys, if you talk to a guy like a Steve Bartilla or something like that I've talked to, it's like he doesn't want to really hunt near his cameras per se, right? He'll hunt within reason of them, but he's not hunting like near them necessarily. And he'll oftentimes use them as negative pressure for them to move them to another,
to funnel deer in a certain direction.
Right, which is a really interesting kind of concept, right? But so I'm just curious because some guys will never hang a camera where they plan to hunt. And then I'll just say for me personally, it's like I have no problems doing that. Like I'm not going to sit on top of the camera, but it's like I have no problem with the camera being 20, 30 yards away from me. You know what I mean? And knowing that I'm getting deer there. So I'm just curious what you're kind of...
Well, I don't think that there's a shoebox. Everyone's looking for a shoebox, one size fits all answer, and I don't think it's there. With every camera, I think you have to ask yourself, how am I accessing this camera? Is it going to negatively impact deer movement? Right. And if the answer is yes,
change it.
You need to change how you're accessing it. Or simply don't check that camera as often.
Yep.
So
or hang a cell camera there.
Or hang a cell camera. Exactly. So there's cameras where I'll hang on the tree next to where I'm set up. Or I know there's a camera there that I can access to hunt, to hang and bang. I'll get in that tree, no problems. But there's other cameras that I have that I won't go in because I know I can't access it the right way. Because it's going to negatively impact deer movement. I'm not going to have an opportunity there.
Right.
I'm just hurting myself.
Right.
So, ask yourself.
Right. I do both. The last 2 deer I killed, I got on like the deer I shot this year. I got on video. He came in, worked the scrape, and you can hear me shoot him in the video.
Nice.
The year before that, I shot a 7.5-year-old buck. It was peak rut, but went in there first sit, hunted it, and I got him on picture like as I was shooting him. And he was a big deer too, so
nice.
I don't have an issue hanging those cameras where I'm hunting, because during the rut when I'm going in and I'm checking in, I'm trying to hunt stands, I can switch cards while I'm in there.
Right.
But I have cameras that I let soak as well. And my big thing is, it's nice to know, like, was that deer killable on 11th or 12th? And I don't know, this most recent information is huge at that time of year. When, we're talking about the rut in late season. I think that's pretty important.
Yeah.
Now, early season might be a little bit different story.
Right. I think it's fair also to point out too. It's like, and I know with the hunting with Chad, I know Jake, you and I have hunted together. I assume you probably follow a similar kind of pattern. But in public, it's like I'm hanging my cameras high, so I'm not really too worried about deer actually seeing my cameras or getting impacted by my cameras, because they're going to be at a minimum 8 feet off the ground, right? And so I'm not worried about them getting camera shy or whatever the case might be. So the only intrusion I'm really going to have, or the only negative impact, is actually going to be me checking them.
Right.
And a lot of times for me, it's out of state public, in a lot of cases. So it's like I'm putting it in March and I'm going back to look at it in November, right? So it's like a first time in, essentially, at that point. Local ones, I do check a little bit more often, but even still, I'm going maybe every once a month, walking in, checking the camera. Getting out. And then when I go in, I basically go in like full hunting setup, like descented, the whole nine. I'm trying to be as low impact as I possibly can.
Well, I think there's a whole strategy there about checking cameras on weather days that we've talked a little bit about.
For sure.
If you have the opportunity, if it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, and it's raining outside, like, get your butt off the couch, turn the football game off, and go check your cameras. Like, you could check, even if you have bad access, it's a camera that, you don't want to be that intrusive, go by going in and check it. If it's raining, go check it. If it's a high wind day where deer are going to be bedded down, holding tight, go check your cameras. Like, there's a lot of things that, like, people just, they get into a habit of, well, every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, I'm just going to go. I'm
All
going to go
days are
check
not created equal to check your camera.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the end of the day.
Exactly. And we understand that some folks out there, it's like, work schedule and stuff will dictate when you can go out there.
Yeah.
So we get that. I think what we're saying is like, when you have the opportunity to check, right, on a day that's going to be most beneficial to you, make sure you're taking advantage of it.
Or a
You know what I
real
mean?
windy, nasty day. I love to go in and hang a set. Like, if I'm on a hunt, if I know I'm going to hunt there 2 days later, I'll go in when it's windy as heck and hang that set.
Right.
Saw my shooting lanes.
Yep. No,
With the wicked handsaw.
With the wicked handsaw. Yep. Got to get you in a saddle, Jake.
I have one.
Oh, there you go. There you go. It's a lot easier.
We got it at the end of the season. I haven't.
Oh,
played
that's
with
right.
it yet.
Yeah. We gotta get you on that. That way you're
Tethered
not.
train.
That way you're not having to do your setups. Just
Well,
like,
I
it's
see
all
what you're saying
hanging
there,
hanging hunts. You know what I mean? So you're not. It's even lower impact. But
It'll have its place. I'll use it.
yeah. So all right. So let's talk a little bit. I want to talk about. Are you a little more worried about? I guess camera placement close to where you're going to set up during late season, given that there's been. So my mindset is like, when I look at it, I'm like, man, the deer have had a whole season of pressure, right? People checking cameras, people hunting them.
Yeah.
Turkey hunting, gun hunting's been in. Like, it's just there's been a ton of people in the woods, and so that time of the year, I do, like, me personally, I do try to set up off where I might have cameras placed, because especially if I have hunted in and around those areas during the other parts of the season, I'm just looking to try to remove as much pressure as possible as possible. So I don't know if you guys have like a similar approach that time of year.
I mean, I'm in a different boat because I can plant food plots.
Right.
We don't hold the deer, so I can put the cameras right on the food plot. They're not bedded nearby, so
Right.
they're making a pretty big commute to get to the food. So I can go check the cameras in the middle of the day and see what fed there that night.
Right.
Are you setting up on those food sources, or are you setting up on travel to food?
The cameras?
As far as hunting too.
Hunting, I would try to chop them off. Like with this wicked cold weather, they were there early enough where I was in a position to maybe make a move. But in some other areas, it's the travel. If you don't have the food and you know where they're going to go feed, find where they're traveling to get there and set up there and try to intercept them. And I had pretty good luck with that.
And it kind of
as well.
goes back to what we were talking about before. You're just kind of working almost in reverse as you did early in the season as far as leapfrogging, right? Because like, instead of leapfrogging back to bed with them, right, you're kind of doing the same thing, but you're leapfrogging from like, okay, we know they're showing up 30 minutes after dark in the food this time of year because it's late season. So it's leapfrog back an hour, their trail, back to like whatever the most dominant pinch point's going to be that that they're probably going to use, and let's go back that direction, right? So it's a little bit almost the reverse of what we would do in early season.
I've never had a ton of hunting success late season. Lots of daylight pictures of bucks, and in spots I hindsight should have hunted, but my camera strategy late season is food. Only looking, and I'm gathering all the data, but specifically looking at those very harsh weather days, like double-digit temp drops, big decline in wind speed days, on food sources, and then if I'm getting photos within an hour of shooting lane, then if I can see in the weather forecast, hey, this is going to happen again, then that's when I'm making my move. But I'm hunting travel from bedding to food. I'm typically not hunting on food sources because what I see in those isolated areas, those does will show up, and I don't want to be sitting in a stand for a half hour with 15 deer underneath me because at some point I'm going to get busted.
Yep.
Right. It's interesting. I was talking to, this might be, I don't know if you ever heard this. I was talking to Don Higgins, and as you know, like he loves late season, and he loves that, especially during the rut. He likes that post Thanksgiving kind of time frame. Even though he killed 200 inches in October, he still loves.
He kills big deer no matter what
Yeah,
time
it doesn't
of year.
matter. He could do it in June if he wanted to, probably. But we were talking about late season specifically because he loves the late season. He loves the gnarly weather. And so one thing that I learned from him was that he's like, late season, everyone gets all ate up on food. He's like, and rightly so. He's like, because they have to get nourishment back in them, and that season's harsh, and they've been run down from the season and stuff like that. He said, but it's not as much of a as a priority as people want to think that it is. He's like, and he started talking about the biology of deer because he's had a deer farm for 30 years or whatever it was. And he said the research that they did, like deer actually I think we recognize this during the regular season or during early season in rut and stuff like that. Like deer's body actually changed to where they start needing to intake less and less food as the fall kind of wears on. So as you hit like mid-October, their need to take food in kind of like nosedives, which also plays into the idea of like the October lull a little bit, right? Of course, acorns and stuff like that in the timber become prevalent, and that's where you kind of want to focus. But their need to go eat becomes even less and less. So he was saying even during late season, he's like, even though food is like what you want to kind of focus on, he was like, it's not equal. Yeah. He said they're only going to really move to food sources because at that point their body is at the peak of not requiring food. Like their biology says, I don't need food. He's like, unless you get that like -5 degrees, a little bit of rain, where it's like they just have to get up and go eat. He's like, you'll see most days in a field, you'll see an average number of deer. He's like, you look at those super harsh weather days, he's like, all the big bucks are out there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was really interesting to me because I always kind of thought, oh, it's late season. Food's money almost any day, right? But it's just based on their biology, it's just not the case.
That's a good point. Something I just started reading about, the biology of that deer actually changing, like their body temperature starts to decrease. Like they start to conserve energy because they have less caloric intake. You know, to your point. But aside of that, like again, another strategy that this year I started doing late season is looking at that super high value thermal cover in areas. You know, in hill country, as you start to look at those southeast facing slopes and looking at, you know, some of those bedding opportunities as well.
So let's move to patterning deer during the rut, which is always we just had an overhead announcement. I think everything's safe. We're secure.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
So, you know, patterning deer is always an interesting topic, like whenever it comes to rut, right? So, because when people talk about patterning, I feel like they think of it from the perspective of, like you would pattern a deer during early season, right? Like during the early to mid season, right? Like, because once they hit rut, it's like crazy. So all those big buck killers, it's like they try to get, if they're patterning a deer, they try to get it done in October, right? Before they hit pre-rut, really. But I think there's this idea of like micro patterns that you can use during the rut, right? I think we started touching on them a little bit when we start looking at doe bedding and like when those areas you're going to come in. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you're using trail cameras to start to figure out some of those micro patterns around the rut time?
Yeah. You know, some of that stuff goes back to, I think, historical trail camera data. What I personally see with, you know, running so many cameras is those deer holing up in certain areas, like in a 3-day window, where that is consistent year over year over year, and it's all related to doe bedding when that doe family group is coming to heat. And Steve Bartilla is a big advocate of, you know, the healthiest does are going to, you know, come into estrus first, and you can kind of almost pattern, you know, your property, you know, your rut strategy based on, you know, doe family groups and how they're coming into estrus. So I think, to me, like a micro patterning inside the rut on a specific deer, you know, is partly historical, multiple years of trail camera data, could be scrapes, could be doe bedding, could be travel between bedding, but it all does come back to doe bedding and within 72, I call it 72 hours.
Right. Jake, are you seeing the same type of thing on
private?
Private?
I would agree with most of what you said. As far as I'm still at the annual data, I haven't done a really good job of kind of micro patterning during the season.
Right.
That could be a shortcoming of my own, but
well, you kill big deer, so I think you're doing all right.
I live in Illinois. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, like inside late October all the way through November, called, you know, into the post-rut Thanksgiving time frame, like that's where cell cameras, you know, finding those micro patterns in real time, like that's the data from a cell camera that can change your season.
Right.
You know, one picture can change your season.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this though, when it's November, it's the rut, I'm looking at my iPhoto stream, and I'm going back 365 days before. Where do I want to be?
Right.
And I still organize them on my lap or my big computer at home. But when I'm on the road and I'm running around, I go through that, and that's kind of my process. Which I mean, it's kind of barbaric, but it works.
I mean, it works. I mean, you're really just looking for what are the key dates. You know what I mean? And that's really what you're trying to do in micro patterning, right? I think the one thing you mentioned, like with Steve, with the idea of like the healthiest does are going to be the ones who are most consistent with their estrus. The other part that kind of was a game changer for me And I actually taught this to Don Higgins, and I like literally wanted to end the podcast right there because I was like, I just shared something with Don that he didn't know before. I think I've now arrived, which was, and I learned this. It wasn't like I came up with it on my own. It was a conversation. I did a DIY report with Bronson Strickland, about deer movement, like, months ago, right before rut. And the one thing I learned from him was that the doe will actually pass her estrus cycle to her doe fawns. So doe families they usually don't leave an area, right? They all stay together. The mom, the grandma, the daughter's daughter, like they all kind of live in one spot. And so long as those does are not killed, right, and there's not maybe a new doe introduced or whatever, their cycle will stay intact. So if you can locate the doe, right, or the doe family, right, and you can figure out like they come within this window, that group is going to come in within that window every year. So now you can start to pattern bucks around when that doe family is supposed to come in. So when people like, I've started looking at trail camera data differently, where it's like before I was like, oh, big buck, this is awesome, and now I'm more going, great, I'm seeing some does. There's a doe family here. Now this year, let me watch and figure out when bucks start showing up. When bucks start showing up, I know that they're coming in, and now I can start to figure out how I want to hunt it.
To that point, I've been really bad about this spot, just going through and deleting photos of those. But if you could pay attention to how those does are interacting, whenever their tails are down, when they're pushing their yearlings or fawns away.
That's a good point.
Like that is stuff. Key. That is super, super key inside the rut. Like that stuff. Yep. That stuff is really what you want to be looking at for those micro patterns, because like, okay, it's about to happen.
Yeah.
And to validate to that, I grew up on a very small deer farm as well, and
right.
The 10th, November 10th and 11th, whatever reason, those are when our does are in peak estrus. You can
nice.
This the way they act, the way clinically, I can't say 1,000% sure they are peak estrus, but based on behavior and how everything year over year, I grew up like ever since I can remember we've had deer. So
right.
like I got every 10th or 11th, and things are just chaotic in our deer.
Right. The one thing too that I'm picking up, I think people should pick up on, and it's when it's possible for you, is that we've talked a lot about having trail cameras out 365, right? Making sure that you're got something in the timber all the time, so you're kind of getting as much info as you possibly can. But we're getting ready to open up here at the outdoor show, so we'll close it here, and just want to know late season and quickly, what are we looking for in our images during late season? Like how are we looking at those images?
Similar. I still like to run them on video at that time to see how quick are they coming into the food source, where they're coming into the food source, and correlating that with weather. Those are kind of the big three for me.
Right.
Yeah. Same for me. I'm running less video at that time, more photos, but looking at the time of the actual image and direction of their travel. Again, if they're showing up consistently to that food source within an hour, then I'm looking at the weather forecast, looking for those extreme weather days,
right,
and then trying to cut them off.
And for me, a lot of time, I'm looking at just to learn who probably is going to be around for the next year.
Yep.
That's when I'll start my inventory for the upcoming year. Exactly, because now I'm going, this guy lives here in late season. There's probably a good chance he's going to live here during the summer. He may disperse. I don't know, but you can start to kind of backtrack a little bit. Did I see him in mid-season? Is he a homebody?
I see that a lot.
So you start to try to paint your picture for the following year is when that kind of starts. So, all right, buddies, I appreciate you guys coming on and doing this. It was a good chat. Before we let you go, though, where can people find out more about you? What do you have going on in the upcoming future that people should know about?
Yeah, thanks for having us on. We really enjoyed this. You can find us on Exodus Trail Cameras pretty much anywhere. And depending on when this comes out, we're going to have the render either pre-sailing or shipping. So we've been working on that for a long time.
And the render is the cell camera that's coming out.
It's 4G Verizon LTE camera. So we're really excited about that. And we also have a trail camera podcast if you want to kind of geek out on the hardware and some of these, these types of conversations, trail cam radio. So we'd be happy to have you over there.
Yeah, awesome. So as you guys know, these are my buddies from Exodus. Love these guys. Hunt with these guys. Check them out. Check out Trail Camera Radio. Make sure you check out the render when it comes out. Thanks for listening, everyone. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show, and that is a wrap for this round of the DIY report. I'd like to thank Chad and Jake for joining for the past 3 episodes. Be sure to visit ExodusOutdoorGear.com and follow Exodus on Instagram and Facebook. Of course, I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so. We'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those 2 things for us. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
Makes me proud, makes me steal. I could show you through the door. I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming, if it all. It takes a special knowing to color for. Damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I